are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for all right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And
keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Gruenfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Tuesday, January 23rd. We have a lot to talk about on the show today, but before I get into that, as always, just want to remind you guys to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to the following link, that is streamelements.com/GSMCSportsNetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is streamelements.com/GSMCSportsNetwork./tip. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker on the bottom of the show segment down below. So, with that being said, let's get into what we are going to talk about for today. So we're going to start off by talking about some coaching change updates across the league. We have some new head coaching positions that have now been filled, so we'll talk about that. Also, some coordinators being shuffled around and parting ways, so we'll get into that in a second. Then in the second part of the show, I'll talk about, so it's really just going to be kind of like the post-mortem for the teams that lost in the divisional round. So we'll talk about the Texans and the Packers and the bright futures that they have. Then in the third part of the show, we'll talk about the Buccaneers and what their future is like, and also the controversy around Todd Bowles and him not using the final timeout at the end of the game on Sunday. And then in the final part of the show, we'll talk about what's next for the Buffalo Bills, because obviously that was a huge loss for them, and again, suffering another playoff loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. So we'll get into that in the final part of the show. But also, I just wanted to mention, if you may have noticed, there has been more content that has been produced on both channels. We have more shows. We got the basketball show. We have the sports show, the Tate Cast. We're really starting. We're going to have an MMA show as well. So we have a lot of things coming up. Here on the GSMC Sports Network. So I'm really excited about it. Because for a while it's kind of just been me. So you're not. So now you don't have to just deal with me. You got other perspectives on certain things as well. So it's a good time. It's an exciting time now, and that's going to continue. So make sure to tune into all those. Those will be posted. All those shows are posted throughout the day as well. So I just wanted to touch upon that. But yeah, so let's get right into the first topic of the show now, which is talking about some coaching changes here. So two head coaching positions that I want to talk about. So first, the Tennessee Titans, they hired offensive coordinator Brian Callahan to become their next head coach. He was the offensive coordinator for the Bengals for the last 5 seasons. He's also the son of current Browns assistant Bill Callahan. He's a guy that's worked with quarterbacks like Matthew Stafford. He's actually, who else has he worked? He's worked with, he's worked with Stafford, because I was doing some research on him. So yeah, he served as the quarterbacks coach for the Raiders, and the Lions. And he also was a coaching assistant with the Denver Broncos. So he's worked with Peyton Manning, he's worked with Stafford, he's worked with Derek Carr, and of course Joe Burrow as well, being with the Bengals. And he was the offensive assistant in Denver when the Broncos won Super Bowl 50. So he got to work with Peyton Manning and Brock Osweiler as well. And you would think like, oh yeah, he worked with Peyton Manning. Well, he worked with Peyton Manning when that was probably Peyton Manning's worst season as a starting quarterback. 9 touchdowns to 17 interceptions. Now again, you're working with Peyton Manning, so that's not something to diminish. But still, that was the season where he just did not play. I mean, the Broncos won the Super Bowl, but it was that season. He also worked with Brock Osweiler, who also played some games as well late in the season when Peyton Manning got hurt. So yeah, that's a little bit on him. And yeah, I mean, they're bringing him in because, again, offensive coach, and that's something that I've said, although the next head coach that I want to talk about is not an offensive guy. But that's kind of where the league is going, is you got to have an offensive coach. And the Titans are hoping that he could develop Will Levis, because the Titans, the last 3 years, they were 17th in total yards in 2021, 30th in total yards in 2022, and then 28th this past season. They averaged 17.9 points per game, which, the Jets, the Giants, the Patriots, and the Panthers only averaged fewer. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see, what this hire leads to. I mean, the Titans, they got some question marks. Will Levis, he had a great debut, but, kind of slowed down after that. Derrick Henry's a free agent. We'll see if DeAndre Hopkins sticks around. So Titans are kind of in rebuild mode. So we'll see what this leads to for them. And then also the other hire was the Raiders made Antonio Pierce their full-time head coach, which it seemed like that was kind of trending that way, And I think it was the right move. The Raiders did play better when he took over. I know some people are kind of, I know somebody that is a Raiders fan, and he was saying that there's still some issues that Antonio Pierce has to work out. I think like clock management, things like that. But, the defense, that was something that's been a problem for the Raiders for years, and they seemed to play better when Antonio Pierce took over. I mean, listen, they beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead, which, doesn't happen very often. You could tell that and that's kind of been the weakness of the Raiders team for a lot of years now. But now it's kind of, the offense that now looks like to be the issue. Because, listen, Aiden O'Connell I don't think is the long-term answer at quarterback. So they're going to have to address that. And you also have Josh Jacobs, who's a free agent as well. Are they going to bring him back? Because Zamir White, who's the backup for the Raiders, he actually did pretty good when Jacobs was out, when Jacobs missed some games. So we'll see. But I'm happy for him. He also being a Giant fan too, and my mom said the same thing. It's like, oh, well, the Giants don't have a defensive coordinator. Maybe we should get Antonio Pierce. My mom's like, she wanted to see him get the job with the Raiders, and that's exactly what happened. So the Raiders also brought in Marvin Lewis to kind of help out. Well, Antonio Pierce wanted his help because Antonio Pierce has worked with Marvin Lewis before, and Marvin Lewis obviously was a longtime head coach with the Bengals, and I know people will talk about the playoff losses with the Bengals because they had a lot of those, and how they couldn't get over the hump with Marvin Lewis as the head coach. But I think having him there to help out Antonio Pierce and the experience that he's had as a head coach, you can have that. And also you have Tom Coughlin as well, reached out to Antonio Pierce and said, if he needs help, he's there for him to lean on. So, and I think that's big. That you have former head coaches that are willing to help you out because, you're just kind of learning on the fly. So I like the hire because with the Raiders, they're trying to make in the past, they make these splash hires. Like you bring in John Gruden and that really didn't work out. And obviously we know what happened there. And then of course, you had Rick Bisaccia that took over and the Raiders ended up making the playoffs with all the drama that surrounded them in 2021. And then they elected to hire Josh McDaniels, and Josh McDaniels just was not a Derek Carr fan. They got Derek Carr out of there. You bring in Garoppolo, and that just failed. And now, of course, they benched him. Aiden O'Connell stepped in as the starter. So, I think that was I think the Raiders did the right thing. And also you have, the star players, Max Crosby, Devontae Adams coming out and saying and advocating for him to be the guy. And Max Crosby even saying that he would request a trade if they don't bring him back. So I think the Raiders did the right thing. But we'll see what happens now with him being the full-time head coach. And they got some work to do there. But I'm happy about that for him. So the other thing, too, is the Eagles ended up letting go of both of their coordinators just today. They let go of Brian Johnson, the offensive coordinator. They also let go of Sean Desai, the defensive coordinator, which was, the right moves. Nick Sirianni looks like his job is safe. And yeah, I mean, you go back to last year. I mean, Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon, both sides of the ball were great for the Eagles, and that's why they got to the Super Bowl. I mean, on the defensive side, you had multiple guys with double-digit sacks. On the offensive side of the ball, I mean, the Eagles were one of the best offenses in the league. And they kind of were that to start off the year, but still, there was something off. They weren't running the football as well. Again, Jalen Hurts turning the ball over. Something was off. And, and obviously A.J. Brown, with you go back to the regular season game against the Bucs, him and Hurts, having a conversation on the sidelines. It just seemed like they couldn't get consistency on that side of the ball. But again, they were 10-1, so it really didn't matter. But then the wheels just fell off, and then you had, Sean Desai taking a step back. And, they made Matt Patricia the defensive coordinator, and that didn't pan out. And the Eagles tried to fix the secondary. They traded for Kevin Byard from the Titans. It just really didn't pan out for them. So, yeah, I think now we just got to see what they end up doing there, because if it goes bad next year, Nick Sirianni might be the guy that's on his way out. So, also the Bears... they hired offensive coordinator Shane Waldron. He was the offensive coordinator for the Seahawks, and did really well with getting Geno Smith's career back on track. Although, yeah, they took a step back this year, but still, the Bears, and we'll see. What are they going to do? Is Caleb Williams going to be the guy because they have the number 1 overall pick, or are they going to keep Justin Fields? So that remains to be seen. But that's just another coaching change there. Obviously, they're keeping Eberflus. So, yeah. And then actually, a quick college thing. So Bill O'Brien, who the Patriots brought back to be their OC, he's now going to be the offensive coordinator next year for Ohio State. So he goes back to college after 1 year, returning to the NFL. So that was kind of brief. And then also, actually, the Saints, they fired their offensive coordinator, Pete Carmichael. He was there for years, 18 seasons. Which I did not realize. Well, he served as the offensive coordinator for 15 of them, so he was with the Saints for 18 seasons. But yeah, he was successful with Drew Brees, with Sean Payton, but things just, again, it might be time for a change, and that's exactly what the Saints are doing. And the Saints, the last couple of games of the season, they looked really good offensively. It was like, where was that all year? So again, I'm not really a fan of them keeping Dennis Allen, but that's what they're going to do. But yeah, Carmichael's out as the OC for the Saints. I don't think they made any moves there. I don't think they hired anybody as the OC. I can check really quick here. But yeah, I mean that's pretty much all the coaching changes I wanted to talk about. Let me know what you guys think about them. But yeah, I don't think. Yeah, so I see the Saints request interview with Jared Johnson for offensive coordinator. Zach Robinson had an offensive coordinator associated with the Rams. Texans, Jared Johnson's with the Texans. Yeah, Robinson's with the Rams. So, yeah, the position hasn't been filled yet. So we'll see. We'll keep an eye on that. But I think that's pretty much all the coaching changes that I wanted to get into. And obviously, Bill Belichick, he had a couple of interviews with the Falcons. Harbaugh met with the Falcons as well. We're still waiting on Vrabel and where he could potentially go. But, yeah, it's going to be interesting. But I know at least for the NFC East, it's going to be the same next year. You're going to have Sirianni and you're going to have Mike McCarthy. So that makes me feel good because I don't want to see Harbaugh or Belichick come to the NFC East unless they're coming to the Giants. But then the Giants would have to let go of Dable. So... but yeah, that's pretty much all the coaching changes. No updates really on the big names. Of course, they're just interviewing. I feel like one of those big names is going to end up on the Chargers. So we'll see. But we're going to take our first break now, and then when we come back, we're then going to talk about the Texans and the Packers. We're going to talk about their bright futures because, listen, they lost some tough playoff games over the weekend. More so the Packers. The Texans kind of just got blown out by the Ravens, unfortunately for them. But we're going to talk about why the future is bright for both of those teams when we come back from our first break. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we are now going to talk about the Texans and the Packers and the bright futures that both of those teams have. And you might have noticed now when we go to break, we actually have like videos that we'll play instead of just the the graphic that we put up. So when I first came back, like the audio for that was still playing, so I didn't want to like that being talking over that. So, but yeah, just to make the break more lively. So, which I think is good. But yeah, let's get into this. So Texans and the Packers. So yeah, obviously the Texans, I mean, they got blown out 34-10, and the Packers, they lost a heartbreaker to the 49ers. But these two teams have bright futures. Again, they definitely were ahead of schedule. I mean, both of them making the playoffs was unbelievable. Didn't really, I mean, for the Packers, I saw that I thought it was more likely for them to make the playoffs than the Texans early on in the season, but then the Packers looked like one of the worst teams in football at certain points. I mean, when Jordan Love was going through that rough stretch, I just, I thought there was no chance. And then the Texans, like, quietly, they would put together some impressive games. I mean, when they went on the road and they beat Jacksonville, I thought that was really impressive, and that put me on notice. And obviously, and the comeback win, well, the shootout with the Buccaneers too. I mean, just seeing how well C.J. Stroud has performed throughout the season. For the Texans, they have their quarterback. They have their head coach, and I did say that yesterday. And it's the same thing with the Packers too. I mean, Matt LaFleur. Like I said, I've kind of criticized him because I look at him as a guy that's kind of just been like an accessory with the Packers, because Aaron Rodgers, was still the quarterback and he won back-to-back MVPs. Now, I think Matt LaFleur had something to do with that, but, let's see now what Matt LaFleur was made of without Aaron Rodgers. And the Packers, listen, it was an up-and-down season, but, the final couple of weeks of the season, the Packers played, well, offensively at least, they played really well. The defense in both playoff games actually played well too. So, I mean, you could argue the Packers should be playing this weekend, against the Lions. But yeah, so Matt LaFleur, I think, kind of silenced the critics, including myself. The fact that they were able to, rally and get themselves into the playoffs, again, roller coaster of a season. Credit to them, really. But both teams, there's things that they can improve on, of course. When you talking about the Texans, so I was reading an article, and the big thing for them is they got to improve, the front seven and also the running game. Now, I thought Devin Singletary did a good job running the football because, it was supposed to be Dameon Pierce. Dameon Pierce was supposed to be, the feature back for them, and he kind of took a step back in year two, and then he was like returning kicks. He actually did run back a kick return against the Browns in the regular season, but yeah, he just kind of disappeared. He was averaging 2.9 yards per carry, and he surpassed 40 rushing yards on just 3 occasions. I mean, that's a big step back. So Singletary, he ended up finishing. Yeah, so they brought him in from Buffalo. He was a free agent, so they brought him in to be the backup for Dameon Pierce. So Singletary actually finished with almost 900 yards rushing. He had 898 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns on 4.2 yards per attempt, 30, and he also had 30 catches for 193 yards. But I kind of knew, even though he was running the football well, I kind of knew, like, going against the Ravens, and I think most people would agree with that, is their running game was going to struggle against this good defense, and the Texans were going to have to throw it. And again, the weather wasn't the best, and we again saw how the Texans played in some inclement weather, so it wasn't going to favor them. You kind of saw that coming. Their running game struggling, so they're going to have to improve the running game. And there are some free agents that, at least, like, you see Saquon Barkley, depending on what the Giants do. I mean, Derrick Henry as well. There's some running backs that could be available. I think Saquon Barkley would be huge for the Texans, but I don't know what the Giants are going to do. Are they going to franchise tag him again, or are they going to let him walk? For me, I'm not advocating for the Giants to do one or the other. I think that, Saquon Barkley was not somebody that the Giants, this Giants regime drafted. So I think they franchise tagged him, before the 2023 season, but we'll see. We'll see. I mean, I'll be happy if he comes back, but again, running backs, it's the importance of the running back has kind of changed over the years, and they age faster, so we'll see. I mean, Saquon Barkley is 26. I mean, you look at Derrick Henry, I think he's 30, so I don't know. Saquon still has some good years left in him, so I don't know, but yeah, the Texans' running game is something they got to improve on. Also, they have a lot of free agents on the defensive side of the ball. So you have Jonathan Greenard, who led the team in sacks, Derek Barnett, Jerry Hughes, Sheldon Rankins, veteran guys that have been around for a while. I believe they're also free agents. Yeah, they're all free agents. So yeah, that's something. They're not going to be able to bring all those guys back. But that's something they got to improve on, in free agency and in the draft. But obviously on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, with C.J. Stroud and Tank Dell hopefully comes back and is healthy for next year. Nico Collins breaking out. So they got a nice core, on the offensive side of the ball to go along with C.J. Stroud. And also the tight ends. I mean, you saw Brevin Jordan making plays. I mean, had that big touchdown against the Browns in the playoffs. Dalton Schultz, who they brought over from Dallas, which was a smart move. He's a good tight end. So you kind of got to like with the, and also Robert Woods with the veteran experience. So I like the direction the Texans are heading in. Like I said, they got their quarterback, they got their head coach, and they're just going to continue to build up this team. So we'll see what happens. And then as for the Packers, listen, they got a very young team. They have a very young team. They got the youngest team in the NFL on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, Jordan Love, again, roller coaster of a season, but he really finished the season strong. Obviously, the playoff game against the Niners, the game-ending pick, it kind of reverted back to how he was during that rough stretch where, he was throwing a game-ending interception, against the Broncos, the Raiders, the Steelers. But you know what? Again, you also could say he's just trying to make a play. But again, I mean, it was on first down. You could have maybe, I know Bosa was chasing after him, but maybe you could have got a couple of yards or, at least get back to the line of scrimmage, run another play. But it is what it is. I mean, if the Packers got into field goal range, are you going to have confidence that Carlson was going to make the kick after he just missed one? I mean, Matt LaFleur said he would pray every time he would go to – I mean, I've never heard a head coach say that he was praying every time the kicker would line up to line up for a field goal. But, yeah, that was the case. But, yeah, I mean, they got the youngest team in the NFL. Jordan Love is the guy moving forward. I thought the offensive line did an incredible job in the two playoff games against Dallas and the 49ers, who have good defensive fronts. So you got that. And then, of course, you have the weapons. I mean, you got Christian Watson, who's a second-year player. Romeo Doubs, a second-year player. Dontavian Wicks, Jaden Reed, who are rookies. I mean, Bo Melton coming out of nowhere, making plays last couple of weeks, catching the touchdown against the 49ers. And the defense. The defense, one of the big things, at least, what I was looking up is, the Packers need safety help. That's one thing. I mean, you have Alexander, who's, a Pro Bowler, of course, a Pro Bowl caliber corner. But, the secondary needs some help. Of course, you got Rashawn Gary rushing the passer as well. The defense obviously could use some work, and we'll see. Do they bring back Joe Barry? I mean, I think, I'll be honest, and Packers fans probably don't want to hear it, but I think he did enough to kind of keep his job. But we'll see. We'll see if they let him go. Yeah, I mean, there, and Aaron Jones was the veteran, the veteran on the offensive side. We'll see if he comes back next year, because he ran the football really well. He finished the season strong. He was the guy that was banged up all year, But, the final few games of the regular season, rushed for over 100 yards, and then, of course, had a great performance against the Cowboys, 3 rushing touchdowns in the game. And, he played well against the 49ers as well. I was surprised at the Packers being able to run the football against the Niners, which is something I think we'll talk about later in the week. But I think that's something that maybe could work in the Lions' favor. If the Packers are able to find success there, maybe the Lions could do the same thing. But yeah, I mean, for both of these teams, you expect them next year to make a big leap. I mean, well, the Texans, they won the AFC South, but now it's like, okay, what can you do? And they won a playoff game, so now you got to take that next step. Maybe you beat one of these top teams next year. If you're not the top team, if you got to go on the road and play a team in the playoffs next year, you beat that team and you take the next step and you get into the championship game. For the Packers, I mean, listen, their divisions. I mean, the Texans division. I mean, it's going to be competitive. It's going to be competitive because the Colts are going to be better. The Jags are going to want to, redeem themselves from the collapse that they had. The Titans, that's, the team that's kind of, they're the last place team right now. But for the Packers, I mean, their division, you figure every team is going to be in it next year. Because we'll see what the Vikings do at quarterback. If Kirk Cousins comes back after the Achilles injury, because, they have a loaded offense. And the defense played a little bit better this year. You got the Bears. Are they going to have Caleb Williams as quarterback, or is it going to be Justin Fields? Obviously they have a ton of offensive playmakers. With DJ Moore, and they were running the football well this year at times. And obviously Cole Kmet at tight end. The defense, too, was playing better. The Lions, playing in the NFC Championship game now. Yeah, the division's going to be competitive next year for the Packers. But we'll just have to see. But these teams are going to be good next year. And look, I mean, obviously it didn't end the way they wanted it to. They got this far, but the future is bright for both the Texans and the Packers. So before we go into our second break of the show, I just want to remind you guys once again to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to the following link. That is streamelements.com/GSMCSportsNetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is streamelements.com/GSMCSportsNetwork./tip. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker on the bottom of the show segment down below. So, when we come back from our second break of the show, we will talk about the Buccaneers. Obviously their playoff loss, what the future holds for them. We'll also get into the controversy around Todd Bowles not using his final timeout, which I'll be honest, I really didn't take notice of that. This was after the Baker Mayfield interception, so to basically seal the game. So we'll get into that as well. They also have a lot of free agents. So we'll get into that when we come back from our second break of the show. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we are now going to talk about the Buccaneers and what their future is after their 31-23 playoff loss to the Lions. So I want to get into the Todd Bowles thing because that's been something that's been talked about a lot over the last couple of days now since they since they lost to the Lions. So they didn't use their last timeout. And so after the Baker Mayfield interception, and I was kind of just like reading up on it, I was looking at a New York Post article. So the Lions had the ball at the Buccaneers 29 with 1:33 left in the fourth quarter. And this is after, Baker throws the pick that basically, which, I was like, yeah, the game's over now. And, we see, teams not using their last timeouts. But yeah, so there was 1:33 left in the game. Tampa had one timeout remaining. They could probably, they would at least maybe get the Lions to a fourth down, and they'd have to kick a field goal. Now, for me, one thing I would say is the Bucs would also have to stop the Lions, and I felt like the Bucs weren't going to be able to do that. But again, that's just my opinion. But anyway, so yeah, they had one timeout remaining, and have the fourth down play with about 7 seconds remaining. Should each play take no more than 2 seconds? That's what the New York Post article was saying. So the third kneel down came with 36 seconds left in the game. Goff was kneeling with time left on the clock. So it wasn't like the Lions were letting the clock wind down and then they would take another kneel down as like the play clock's about to expire. They were still kneeling. They were kneeling with the time still left, and Bowles was not using the timeout. So they just let it go all the way down. So people were saying it's possible it's possible the line snapped earlier in the clock to react to the Buccaneers not using the timeout, but Bowles dismissed any aspect of chivalry among coaches. He said it's not a gentleman's agreement. He just said basically Bowles was saying, this is what he said, no point in prolonging the obvious. So he basically saying the Bucs had no chance because then the Lions would have kicked the field goal and they would have been down by 11. But then again, it's like, what if they miss it? Then you get the ball back. But yeah, that's something people have talked about with Dan Campbell is clock management. Is again, you're kneeing the ball down, and there's still time on the clock. They could and they have that timeout, but I guess the Lions figured they weren't going to do it. But yeah, I mean, it just shows you're kind of just waving the white flag because Bowles did also say we competed for 60 minutes. Well, maybe you only competed for most of the game, but then you kind of just gave up at the end. Because again, what if like people are talking about on TV everywhere. What if they block the field goal? It doesn't make sense. You play to the end, and basically people are saying that the Bucs didn't play to the end. That Bowles kind of just gave up because he figured, well, it's a chip shot field goal, and they'd be down by 11, and it really wouldn't matter. But again, you just never know. So you could at least take the chance and just call the timeout, let them kick the field goal, and see if they can make it. So, I agree with that. I'll be honest, I really didn't take any notice of this watching the game. I kind of just was like, yeah, this game's over. But, I really did not take notice of the fact that the Lions just were not letting the play clock wind all the way down and then take a knee. They were, doing it with time still left on the clock. So, but I mean, listen, I get it. I mean, you're down 11 and there'd be really no time left. I mean, yeah, it'd be impossible, but you never know. If they block the field goal, what if the Bucs block the field goal and run it back? Like, you just never know. You should take that chance. But yeah, it was a sad ending to their season. I knew it was going to be tough for them. The Lions were the better team. I mean, the Lions beat them this year, and they really didn't have Jahmyr Gibbs. Well, they didn't have Jahmyr Gibbs in that game, and they didn't have David Montgomery. He got hurt in the game. Craig Reynolds was their leading rusher, and he actually ended up scoring a touchdown in the playoff game on Sunday on 4th and 1. So, yeah, the Lions were the better team, but you know what? The Bucs, they showed up, at least offensively, and on defense they did get some stops during the game, but ultimately the Lions were the better team. And listen, they have a lot of question marks going into the off season because of the fact that they got a decent amount of free agents. And I did touch upon this, but I want to just go through the list of players. So Mike Evans is a free agent. Baker Mayfield is a free agent. Devin White is a free agent. Levante David. They're 2 inside linebackers. They're free agents. William Goldston on the defensive line. Greg Gaines on the defensive line. Matt Filer, the guard. Antoine Winfield Jr., their Pro Bowler safety. And then some other free agents as well that aren't really, I wouldn't say are massive. But those are like the big... Chase McLaughlin, also a free agent, their kicker. You had Chase Edmonds, the backup running back. Ryan Neal, strong safety. And some other players as well. But those are the big names right there. Mike Evans, Devin White, Levante David, Baker Mayfield, Antoine Winfield Jr. You're not going to be able to bring all those free agents back. I think for me personally, you start off by bringing back Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans because they were really good together this year. Mike Evans has had a 1,000-yard season every year he's been in the league. And, the touchdown-wise last year, it was kind of a down year, but the Bucs offense had a down year. But again, there's Tom Brady's last year. How long was Brady going to play? Eventually, he was going to have to hang it up. Now, I think if you point to the offensive line, if the offensive line was better last year, I think the Bucs offense would have been better, but because Brady had to get rid of the ball so quickly. But this year was a bounce back season. For Mike Evans, if you want to call 2022 a down year, even though again he had over 1,000 yards, but I was very happy with how Baker performed this year. Played well in the playoff game against the Eagles, but I think it's also because the Eagles just were awful to finish off the year. Their defense was one of the worst defenses in the league. But again, Baker played well there. He played well against the Lions too. But again, the Lions were the better team. And next year. And especially with all these free agents, if you're not going to be, and a lot of these guys, they were on that Super Bowl team. Levante David, Winfield Jr., Devin White, they were on that Super Bowl team. So you might not see them back. Mike Evans, we'll see. The Bucs, they weren't able to come to an agreement on a contract, before the season started. But I don't know. It's kind of hard to see Mike Evans playing somewhere else other than Tampa. If he goes to the Giants, that would be awesome. But I think, and Baker Mayfield even said it. He's like, that he would love to be back, but he'd also like, them to bring back Mike Evans and he said he's a stud. And he absolutely is. Mike Evans is a future Hall of Famer with the kind of career that he's had. He's got a career that a lot of people don't really talk about, because he's been in Tampa for so long. And the quarterback changes. Listen, he played with Mike Glennon. He played with Ryan Fitzpatrick, and obviously played with Jameis for a while. And then he got finally got what he deserved, a consistency at the quarterback position for a little bit, and that was Tom Brady. And what did they do their first year? They won a Super Bowl. And now they bring in Baker. And listen, Baker Mayfield was brought in to compete with Kyle Trask to be the starting quarterback, and Baker just took that job by the horns, and he deserved it. And he played well this year. Was, I think, statistically his best season as a starting quarterback. And yeah, it was a rough couple of years for him. It really was. The Browns are like, we're gonna move off of you, get Deshaun Watson. Baker goes to Carolina, and that doesn't work out. Then the Rams picked him up because they needed a quarterback, and he had that Thursday night comeback where he just he was learning the playbook on the fly. And then he finds a home in Tampa, and I hope this is his new home moving forward. And the Bucs can continue to build up this team. And they can this division is still, it's going to be better next year, but it's still winnable. But the competition is going to be it's going to be more competitive next year. Because you figure the Saints are going to be better. The Falcons, if they bring in one of these head coaches that are available and they get the right quarterback, and we'll see what the Panthers do. The Panthers actually, they hired from within. They promoted someone to be their GM. I was going to mention that in the first segment, but I didn't do that. So yeah, they hired Dan Morgan as their general manager. So this was a staying in house choice. But yeah, you kind of figured maybe the Panthers would go outside and maybe bring somebody else in, bring a different perspective. But Now they hire from within, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I mean for the Bucs, the division is going to be competitive next year, more competitive, but it's going to be winnable. It's still going to be winnable, in my opinion. But that also depends on what they do, because if you lose some of these key pieces on defense, that's a problem. That's a problem. But we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, again, I'm happy with how the season went for them, that they got to this point. I mean, they finished with a better record this year than they did last year by one game. And listen, I said early on in the season, I was like, this is the team I want to see win it. Then at certain points, it looked like it was going to be the Falcons or the Saints, especially because the Bucs were 4-7. It looked like this is it for them. But then they were able to put it together, and at the end of the season, although there was the hiccup with the Saints in Week 17 where they just, the Saints dominated that game. But they were able to win the next game, although that was a sweat too, only winning 9-0 to the Panthers. They, win a playoff game, and then they, they compete with the Lions. And, we'll see now next year, who ends up coming back. But I think they should start by bringing back Baker Mayfield, bring back Mike Evans, and then you try to maybe bring back at least one of the guys on defense. We'll see. Because I know Levante David, he's been there forever. I think Antoine Winfield Jr. maybe that's maybe someone you prioritize amongst the defensive players to bring back. But we'll see. But that division is going to be better next year, you figure. Because if they bring in the Falcons, bring in Belichick or Vrabel or Harbaugh, yeah, the Falcons are going to, and they get the quarterback. I mean that you look at that team as probably being the best team in the division. So, the Falcons have a good roster. The Saints have a good roster. It's just there's some things they need to improve on. The Saints' consistency was the issue for them. The last couple of games of the season, they beat Tampa and then they destroyed the Falcons. It's like, where was that all year? But, again, we'll see what happens in 2024. But, let me know what you guys think about the Bucs season. Again, for me, I'm happy Baker Mayfield, at least for the moment, has found a new home. And I hope this is his home, for the rest of his career, because I think he deserves it from what he's had to go through. And he's changed. You could tell, he's changed, because obviously when he first came into the league, everyone kind of looked at him as like the next Johnny Manziel with the attitude and things like that. But I think what he's gone through is kind of brought him back to reality. He's humbled him, and now we'll see what happens going forward. I'm looking forward to this being his home, and hopefully they bring back Mike Evans and they bring back some of these other guys as well, and they go out there and they compete for the division next year. So that's really my thoughts on this topic. But again, let me know what you guys think in the comments. So when we come back from our final break of the show, we will talk about the other playoff team that was the last playoff team that was eliminated, the Buffalo Bills, and what's next for them going into the 2024 season. So for one final time today, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are now going to talk about what's next for the Buffalo Bills. So, obviously, we talked about the game yesterday, losing to the Kansas City Chiefs once again in the postseason, 27-24. This time in Buffalo. It was a heartbreaking loss. I mean, you even saw, they panned to fans crying in the stands. I was kind of disappointed as well. I'll be honest, like this weekend, like all the teams that lost, I was just like disappointed to see it. I don't know, because again, like all the teams that are left, I don't really like dislike, and there's some aspects of some of the teams that I like. So like when the Bucs lost to the Lions, I was upset for Baker. The Packers losing, it was upsetting to see that. And the Bills too, because you kind of wanted to see them get over the hump. I mean, I had the Chiefs going to the AFC Championship game, but it was still kind of disappointing because you kind of felt like maybe this was that year for them. But unfortunately for them, that was not the case. So now they go into this offseason. I mean, I saw the video with Josh Allen in the press conference. Just saying like, hey, at least we woke up today. You were saying that yesterday, so it's just depressing. But you know what? Josh Allen, when he steps up to the podium, he usually says the right thing. And talked about believing in the guys in the locker room, and they're going to figure this out to get over the hump. That's basically what he was saying. And we'll see. But the conference next year is going to be better. Like some other teams, this was kind of the year to do it because you had the Chiefs coming in. We're not the same offensive juggernaut that we're accustomed to seeing. There were some flaws with them throughout the season. The Bills obviously beat them in Arrowhead. I mean, they narrowly beat them in Arrowhead. If it wasn't for Kadarius Toney lying offsides, the Chiefs probably, the Chiefs win that game. But the Bills won that. You had Joe Burrow getting hurt this year, which, next year, if the Bengals are healthy, that's another team that the Bills have had a problem with. And, we just talked about C.J. Stroud and what the Texans were able to do. The Jaguars, they beat the Bills this year in London. I don't know how you want to take that, but that happened. And I know the Jags kind of collapsed, but you figured they're going to be competitive too next year. The Colts are going to be better. The Jets with Aaron Rodgers, the Dolphins. I mean, there's so many teams that I know the Bills swept the Dolphins, but still, like, the conference is going to be more competitive next year if, injuries don't happen. But injuries can happen. But I think as long as the Bills have Josh Allen, they're going to be in it. And listen, they were kind of left out to dry. It looked like they were done at 6-6. That overtime loss to the Eagles, it looked like that was it for them. But they, after the bye week, they came out and they won their final 5 games. They made the playoffs. They beat the Steelers. And listen, they had their chances in the game against the Chiefs. They really did. I saw I rewatched the Diggs drop where Allen threw the ball up into the stratosphere, and it looked like Diggs could have came down with that. And also Sherfield had a drop as well that he could have caught that would have been critical in the game. You could look to that. But, I mean, listen, again, injuries is a part of the game. Everybody deals with them. But you had guys like Tre'Davious White, their, Pro Bowl cornerback, tearing his Achilles earlier in the season. You had Matt Milano, him missing the rest of the year, him getting hurt and being out the rest of the year. Jordan Phillips, their defensive tackle. Gabe Davis didn't play in the game against the Chiefs, which, listen, he had that big playoff game a couple years ago against them. He could have helped them out. There was no Taylor Rapp for the game, the safety, Bernard, their linebacker, sorry. They were missing some key pieces in this game. You also had Rasul Douglas, who wasn't 100%, who was that acquisition at the trade deadline from the Packers. The Bills, they were missing some pieces. And, if those guys play, maybe it goes a little bit different. But one thing that people are saying is the fact that Bills defense is getting older. They're going to have to that's one thing they're going to have to do is they're going to have to get younger on this defense. They obviously brought over Von Miller to help out last year, but he got hurt and he's getting older. It's they got to get younger and faster on this and on the defensive side of the ball. And then you look at the free agents. Because I was taking a look at that last night. So Micah Hyde's a free agent. Daquan Jones, another defensive tackle. Leonard Floyd, Jordan Phillips. Those are some names there. Taylor Rapp is a free agent. AJ Epinesa, he's a free agent as well, defensive end. Shaq Lawson. Gabe Davis as well. Bill's got a decent amount of free agents. Dane Jackson, a corner. They're going to lose some pieces on the defensive side of the ball. So, and is Sean I guess, they haven't done anything with Sean McDermott yet. Maybe it's too soon to tell, but maybe it seems like he's gonna come back. So we'll see. But yeah, I think on the defensive side of the ball, they got to improve there. They also got to get another wide receiver because, sorry, I'm trying to hold back a sneeze. I apologize. That always, again, that happens at least once or twice on the show, is trying to hold back a sneeze, but we're good now. But yeah, I think another thing is get another offensive weapon. So I was also reading that, because Stephon Diggs did not talk to the media. They asked if, I think the media was, asking for an interview from him, and he basically just said no. He did not want to talk to the media after the game. So in an article I was reading, cutting or trading Diggs before June 1st would cost the Bills over $31 million in dead cap. And then after June 1st, they could save nearly $20 million on next year's cap, but have north of $20 million in dead cap for the 2025 NFL season. So I don't know. Is Diggs going to want out? Listen, another thing I saw on social media is just the picture of him, watching the Chiefs celebrate the AFC Championship victory against them. That's all you see now. Every time the Bills lose now to the Chiefs in the playoffs. There was one that I saw. I don't know if my friend sent it or I just saw it on social media, but there was like 3 Stephon Diggs, of him looking at the Chiefs celebrating. This most. Oh, actually, no. There was that, but then there was also one of Diggs. They photoshopped him of when he was watching them celebrate the AFC Championship game. They photoshopped him with the picture of him dropping the pass in this past playoff game, which I thought was funny. But yeah, we'll see. Again, I don't know what happened to Diggs. Like, I know people are like, oh, he's washed, he's declining, or is it just they're not throwing to him? He should have caught the pass that Allen threw to him, which would have been huge. But I feel like it's like they're also not throwing to him. There was late in the game. This was the Bills' last drive when Allen was throwing to, I think it was Shakir, but he just it hit the ground instead. But people talk about Chris Jones just pushing Deion Dawkins into Josh Allen. That kind of threw off the pass by Allen. But Diggs was open underneath. And I even said it too. I was like, throw to Diggs, also because I kind of needed Diggs to score a touchdown. Diggs was open, so I don't know why Josh Allen didn't take the underneath route. Because, that would have got you closer when it comes to field goal range, and maybe Bass doesn't miss that kick. I don't know. It's a lot of if they did this, it's a hypothetical, but it's not gonna. That's what Allen decided to do. But he had Diggs open, and Diggs could have got a couple of yards there, but yeah, he just really didn't do anything the second half of the season, and I don't want to say that it's all Diggs, declining. I don't think it's that. Because he got off to a great start. I think it's just the Bills had like a different, they had a different way of how they ran the offense. It was just they were running the ball constantly, which is something that they have struggled to do in the past. But now it's just they were going all with the running game. James Cook, he had that monster game against the Cowboys. They really were leaning on the running game and having Josh Allen run the football more as well. Because, you look at Allen's stats. He had under 200 passing yards in the game against the Chiefs. There's some other games. He didn't light up the stat sheet when it came to, throwing the football. So, they took a different approach when they changed the OCs during the season. And, that ended up panning out because, they're trying to limit the turnovers from Josh Allen, and they also ended up making the playoffs and finishing as the 2 seed this year. But, then it didn't really matter because you still lost to the Chiefs, even at home. So, Yeah. There's a lot of with the Bills. There's question marks as well with them going into the offseason. But again, it's going to be hard because next year the conference again is going to be better. You're going to have a healthy Joe Burrow. I mean, you figure if the Chargers bring in the right head coach, if they get Harbaugh, they're going to be in the mix next year. It's it's going to be tough. It's going to be tougher for the Bills next year. But I mean, listen, I think they're going to be one of those teams that's going to be fighting for a playoff spot. But you had the 2 seed. You were at home against the Chiefs. I mean, that was your chance to get it done finally, but that wasn't the case. But again, who knows what would have happened next week when you play the Ravens? You got all these injuries on defense, and the Ravens tiring teams out with their running game and how Lamar Jackson's been playing and the way the Ravens defense has been playing. Would the Bills have even gotten past the Ravens? I don't know. I mean, probably not. But yeah, it's going to be a long off season for the Bills. I don't know when they're going to get over that hump. I mean, I don't think Stephon Diggs leaving is going to help that, because that's really what, put Josh Allen in that elite class when it comes to the top quarterbacks. Once he got Stephon Diggs, he really started to shine, because obviously the first couple of years, I mean, his rookie season was rough. Then 2019 was better. But also because you had Brian Dable who helped develop him as well. But once you got him that number 1 receiver in Diggs, that's when he took off. And, he put himself in the conversation as one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL. But, I mean, there's a lot of blame to go around. I mean, it's coaching. I mean, listen, the Bills lucked out when, McCole Hardman fumbled. But, I mean, if the Chiefs score that touchdown there, we're not even talking about Tyler Bass. We're just talking about Sean McDermott, But obviously people are talking about Allen and Diggs. And it's a lot. It's, Tyler Bass is part of the reason they lost, but you also got to look at, the offense and coaching and the defense being injured. There's just so many things you could point to. It's not one particular thing as to why the Bills lost. But again, they had their opportunities. And, they had the lead, but, they just couldn't get it done. And the Chiefs own them. This is the bottom line. The Chiefs have their number in the playoffs. I mean, the regular season, you could say the Bills have their number, but when it comes to the postseason, when it really matters, the Chiefs have the Bills' number. So, but, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for the show for today. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, what the Bills should do. It's gonna be an interesting offseason for them. I think, there's definitely changes that will be made, and yeah, they're gonna have to improve this roster somehow, because the defense again, that's getting older. I mean, and we'll see what happens with Stephon Diggs if he wants out. But I thought, you look at some of the young players like the Dalton Kincaid, the tight end. He looks like he's going to be a good weapon for them. James Cook, he ran the football well at times this year. So they got and of course you have Josh Allen still, but I think you got to try to find a way to keep Diggs unless he really wants out. But, I mean, I don't think the Bills are trying to get rid of him. I mean, he hasn't come out and said anything, but there's always been, that speculation that Diggs just does not want to be with the Bills anymore. I feel like this might have been the last straw, but we'll see. But, yeah, so that's all the time that we have for today. Thank you guys for watching. We'll be back again tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And until then, I'm Kenneth Grunfelder signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day. And I will see you guys next time. Take care.